Hi, welcome to the Rittners Floral School in Boston, Mass. I'm Dr. Steve Rittner, and it's a pleasure to welcome you into one of our classrooms today. We've got a very neat demo planned for you. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. The time of the year, we're getting close to Christmas, and the typical thing that goes through people's minds, how can I make my house look warm and inviting and especially nice for the holidays? In this particular video, we're going to spend a few minutes talking about tricks of the trade to come up with a very, very lavish and a very, very rich kind of Christmas decoration in terms of your Christmas vase arrangements that are easy to do, fun to do, and at the same time really have good visual impact. I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. Our staff has been very, very busy preparing some examples, and we hope you enjoy this brief inspirational video. So let's get to it. How can we come up with inspirational and really nice looking Christmas displays that have impact and that are easy to do? Well, let's start with this. If you look at this particular design, of course, you never can go wrong with a cute container. And this particular container almost feels like Santa Claus is part of our Christmas decoration. But that's just the start. We start with a container, but what else can we do? Well, on this design, it's really a very, very easy one to construct. A little bit of foliage placed into our container. We've got hydrangea over here, a white hydrangea. We've got some antique green hydrangea over on this side. We've got on this design a cluster of our cymbidium orchids, our green cymbidium orchids right in here, almost like a focal. We've got some of our pepperberries worked here and there around, which gives a lovely effect. And then we've got some of our roses, and that really draws our attention to it. We can derive a few different things from this. One is by using prestige materials, obviously you're going to get a nice effect. Keeping them close, keeping them tight will help you come up with a very, very cool effect in terms of visual impact. But if you think of the different things that we're doing here, one thing that really is striking is the contrast between the bright red of our roses and the more faint colors, the lighter colors of our hydrangea, of our cymbidium orchids. In other words, this really pops out at us. We may not notice it in terms of thinking about it when we're looking at it, but we'll look at a design like this and say, wow, that looks really interesting. And I believe it's the sharp red, the contrast between the red and the other materials that really makes a difference. So contrast can make a very, very big difference in terms of some of the things that you do in terms of making it visually effective. Let me give you another example, my viewer. I think you're going to find it really interesting. It's similar in some ways and different in others. So let's bring our camera back and let's take a look at a second design. And I think you'll find this will be an interesting exercise. Here is another lovely arrangement for the holiday. It's absolutely gorgeous. In this particular one, like our first one, we start with a container. We've got essentially a silver kind of crinkled cracked glass type container. It's absolutely beautiful, works well for this time of the year. And we've got the bulk of our materials in this design are actually alstroemeria. We've got some white alstroemeria here. We've got some pink alstroemeria here and here. We've got here more pink here. We've got some stock in the design. We've got a piece or two of our lily. We've got some, obviously some oriental lilies tucked into the design. Even a little amaryllis worked in there as well. It's a lovely design. But notice we've got the same trick again. The three roses. Notice the three. And they're not smack dab in the middle. They're not clustered together. They're actually slightly to one side if we were to draw an imaginary line here. So it gives almost like an asymmetrical pull to the design. Again, it's a contrast thing. You've got some beautiful materials all placed in fairly close on the design. We even have some Star of Bethlehem mixed in here. And when you look at it, it's got a lot of stuff. It's absolutely gorgeous. But you've got the contrast between the bright red and the other materials that really gives it a little bit of extra oomph on our arrangement. Quick, easy, and fun. The Rittners Floral School way. We could stop at this point, but wait, there's more. Let's show you, my viewer, a few other ideas in terms of coming up with some really cool effects for holiday designing that are fairly easy to do and fun. Again, coming up with lavish designs are really easy at this holiday. I mean, we've got so many beautiful materials we can play with. And notice in this arrangement, we start with a metallic base that's red. It's got some gold fringes to it. We've got a lovely mixture of different things in here. We've got our hydrangea here. We've got a section with our pink alstroemeria. We've got roses, white roses, light pink, dark pink roses, red roses. We've got some of our Fujis here, and we even have a few carnations nestled in. It's absolutely a beautiful composition. To create a focal point in this, smack dab right here, some of our millimeter balls. These are glass millimeter balls. They're like ornaments. We've got some gold ones. We've clustered them right here in the center. It's almost like a bullseye. It's a beautiful arrangement. It could be made one-sided. It could be made on both sides. In other words, it could be used as a table centerpiece, or it could be put on a sideboard. It works very, very well. Now, if we're going to talk about contrast, let's talk about a slightly different kind of contrast on this one. We can take this beautiful arrangement and we can modify it just slightly and come up with something that is equally beautiful, but slightly different. And let me show you how. We've got here a very similar kind of thing. But notice, my viewer, this one is a lot bigger. It's a lot bigger. This one, we have contrast in that we've gone out on the sides. In other words, pretty close to the same type of arrangement in the center. If we were to just cut this off, you'd have something that is very similar. But what we've done is we've extended our foliage out here. We've extended our foliage out here. And we've added a few of our roses coming out on this side and also on this side. So contrast can be achieved different ways. We can achieve contrast in terms of coming up with a few very bright flowers compared to a much lighter design that's a little more subtle, or we can play with the size of the design. And you'll notice these work very well together. They're made in the same container. They have the same cluster of gold balls in the middle. We have the same concept in terms of the hydrangea here and here. We've got our alstroemeria here on both of them. In other words, they are both very similar in terms of content, but this one gives a larger size. It spreads out more. This could be used, obviously, anywhere. It could be used on a mantle. It could be used on a coffee table. It could be used in the dining room as a all the way around type piece, but it's bigger. It's a little bit bigger. So contrast in size sometimes is good. And in fact, I would suggest, my viewer, sometimes if you want to come up with a cool effect, take more than one design, use similar contents in them, and then group them around. In other words, I have two here, but what if we were to have a very long dining room table, put this one in the middle, put this one on one end, and the other one on the other end, or do a similar kind of thing on a mantle or in a bay window. In other words, making use of the contrast in shape and size can work very effectively in clustering your designs together. What do you think, my viewer? It's an interesting idea. You may want to try it. Let me show you another example that I think you may find kind of interesting. Again, along the same idea of contrast and using different tricks to achieve different effects. Here is a very pretty little design. And again, we start with our container. The container is a wicker base. We've got a plastic container inside of it. The plastic container has our foam in it, and a very simple design. Easy to do, really. Starting off with essentially a lily, putting it right in the center, putting a couple of white carnations on one side, 2 or 3 red carnations, 3 as a matter of fact here on the other, a little bit of our millimeter balls here and here for the glitz factor, and then taking a little bit of our birch branch, and then working birch branch around. Contrast between face materials and branchy stuff can be very effective. This is almost giving us a reverse L-shaped design on it. However, we can take our branchy stuff and come up with all kinds of things depending upon how we feel we want to go. And the advantage of using branchy stuff in our designing is it makes our designs feel bigger, and we can come up with quite an interesting effect very, very quickly. Contrast between vase materials and branchy stuff. Now we can also play with this on a slightly different level too. We can take the same design that you see here and amplify it, make it bigger. How can you make it bigger? Well, this is how we're starting. A smaller kind of little wicker drum. Let's go to this one. Same idea, bigger drum. In other words, on this one, we've taken the same concept. Instead of using one lily, we have several lilies. Instead of having 2 here and 3 of our roses here, we've got 2 here, we've got 2 more over here, and we have some of our roses over here, and because it's bigger, we threw in a hydrangea. And then, again, the same trick in terms of using some of our birch branches to achieve the effect. It gives an interesting effect. Now, some of you may like the effect of the branchy stuff, some of you may not. But the bottom line is that you can come up with clusters of these things, and you can use the concept of contrast to come up with some very good effects. Don't like birch branch? Not a problem. Because look, here's what we can do. We can take this and we can actually break it down. I wanted you to see this with the branch idea, but also the idea of just taking our materials and clustering them to come up with interesting effects. Now, some of you may say, hey, you know, Dr. Steve, I like it better without the branchy stuff, and you might, and that's okay. The whole idea behind this is to give you different options and ideas that you may decide you want to follow in your own designing to come up with cool designs for the holiday season. So I'm doing the same kind of thing right over here. I'm just removing some of the branchy stuff. Now look, you may like this better. Now they're a little bit more in terms of roundy kinds of things. But again, we're playing with contrast even here. Contrast in terms of shapes of our flowers, having bright things working against some of the flower materials themselves. What do you think, my viewer? An interesting approach. Let's go on. We have a few more things that we'd like to show you, my viewer, that I think you'll find interesting in terms of just some ideas to come up with interesting effects for the holiday season. Here is one that I know you're going to like. Well, maybe I don't know, but I hope you do. I think you will. This one is kind of cool. One of the things that we always talk about as floral designers is that our floral art tends to communicate. It speaks to people. It speaks on a very, very gut level, emotional level. But communication can take many forms. And typically we look at these things, they give us a mood, a kind of a feeling. But in this particular case, we're also using another design trick. And the design trick is making use of actual language. When you see ho, 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 that definitely says something. It kind of reminds you of Santa Claus. It gets that whole holiday thing in. Why can't we also incorporate language into our floral art? And that's exactly what we've done in this design. The arrangement itself is gorgeous. It stands on its own. A focal area of a lily, a couple of roses on one side, a couple of roses on the other, some pepper berries worked in on the bottom, some branchy stuff worked around to give a natural effect, but then the actual words worked into it. Why not? Why can't we actually communicate? Put things in like ho, 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 Noel, joy. In other words, these things are fairly easy constructed. We generally tend to do them on styrofoam. They add an added dimension to our design. Something like this would work very nicely in a bay window. It would work well in an entry area or possibly in a reception area. And then we could change it if we didn't want to use this particular approach. By removing it, we could turn this very, very easily into a table centerpiece. It would look very, very nicely in that way as well. A lovely arrangement appropriate for the holiday season. Okay, what else do we have? I have several more things that I'd like to share with you, my viewer, before we stop. I think that you'll find them kind of interesting. It's always nice to take a platter and to make a big arrangement. And we've got all kinds of beautiful things here. We've got some amaryllis in white. We've got it in pink. We've got it in red. We've got a focal area of our lilies. We've got some hydrangea. We've got roses. We've got pepperberry here. We've got some of our pines here. We've got some of our Dusty Miller. And of course, let's not forget our prestige of our Cymbidium orchids. This is absolutely gorgeous. It just gives a beautiful melange of all kinds of things, giving a contrast in shapes, in materials, all of these prestige materials that give a lovely effect. Something like this, again, could be used in an entry area or possibly even a bay window. But wait, there's more. We can take this and we can do something else with it. Cool. Because let's say you're entertaining for the party, for the holiday, and you're having a party or some event, or you're having a lot of people over, and you really want to get fancy. Well, we can take this and then perhaps through the use of one of our trumpet or other tall containers, develop something that is even more elaborate. So what do you think about that, my viewer? Contrast in height. We can play with these low on a table, but we can also elevate them above the sight line so that people can have cross conversation. These could be used at food stations. They could also be used as general centerpieces, worked on both sides, to give an absolutely gorgeous display. What do you think? Another idea for a lavish, elaborate holiday design. Now, I have one more thing I'd like to show you, my viewer. I think you'll find interesting. Sometimes there are containers, and then there are containers. And here is one of those containers. Just big containers. And we love to do something with them. Not just leave them lying around or going on a table or bookcase somewhere. We like to design on them. And these can be absolutely amazing. This is not a small design. It's absolutely gorgeous. Sometimes you'll have a container that can be 4 or 5 feet tall that just fills a spot in your home. Decorate it. Fix it up, jazz it up. This is not a 4 or 5 foot tall one, but it's a fairly good sized one. And you can come up with all kinds of Christmas decorations. We're using mostly live materials here, but something like this in a tall standing container could also be used using permanent botanical materials. We've got, again, contrast in all kinds of shapes here. We've got our lily as a focal point right here. We've got our roses, very bright red roses, here, 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 coming along over here. Some of our Star of Bethlehem worked in here. Some of our roses in whites and pinks over here and here. Some of our holly berries worked around here, 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 here. And then some of the absolutely amazing burgundy colored mini callas, giving us a lovely contrast in shape and material and effect, shooting out here, 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 and over there. What do you think, my viewer? Pretty neat, huh? You can do all kinds of really, really cool things as far as Christmas decorations. You can come up with a very, very lavish and rich look. And sometimes it's simply a matter of keeping in mind a few basic things. Use some rich materials, cluster them close together. Use contrast of color. Have something very bright against something that is a little bit more subtle. Play with contrasts in size. Come up with longer and shorter things. Mix them together in modular form. And then consider using branchy stuff to come up with contrast between branchy stuff and your face flowers. Use some of your lettering, language in a design, and then think in terms of scale. Coming up with contrast, not only smaller things that can go on your table easily, but some of the bigger things that can also be integrated as far as your holiday decorations. We've covered a lot of ground in this video. I hope that you've enjoyed it. On behalf of all of us here at Rittners Floral School, I'm Dr. Steve Rittner. We thank you for coming in and visiting with us today.